Brooklyn, 1963. A winter wind crawled between tenements, carrying distant sirens and the smell of gasoline. Streetlights flickered like dying candles. And in a small apartment above a rundown grocery store, Detective Marco Santoro sat alone with a cup of cold black coffee. For 19 years, Marco had worn the NYPD badge with quiet pride. Not the loud kind, the kind men carried in their bones. His father used to say, "A cop has two lives, the one he protects and the one he sacrifices." Marco had already sacrificed plenty. A failed marriage, a son he didn't see enough, nights spent chasing shadows instead of sleep. But nothing prepared him for the call that came that night. Part 2, the call. 11:47 p.m. The phone rang. "Detective Santoro, we've got a body, Pier 42. The dispatcher's voice sounded uneasy. "Mob hit?" Marco asked. A pause. "Looks like it." Marco hung up, grabbed his coat, and descended the narrow stairs into the freezing night. Pier 42 was quiet except for the slapping waves. Officers stood with their collars turned up, breath fogging the air. One lifted the sheet covering the victim. Marco felt his jaw tighten. The man beneath the sheet was Eddie Russo, a low-level bookie who had been Marco's informant for years. A kid from the neighborhood Marco had once promised to protect. Bullet wound, execution style, hands tied. Next to his body was a coin, a pure silver dollar. Marco recognized it instantly. The mark of the Gallucci family, the most brutal crew in Brooklyn. A family Marco had been chasing for years. A family that always vanished just before he arrived. Like ghosts. But the coin, that was new. Part 3, the shadow in the alley. Hours later, Marco left the pier and walked alone through narrow back streets of Red Hook. Snow began to fall. Quiet, soft, deceptive. The city looked peaceful, but Marco knew better. Halfway down an alley, he noticed a shadow detached from a wall. A man stepped forward. Tall, broad shoulders, long coat, hat pulled low. "You're Santoro," the man said calmly. Marco stopped. "And who the hell are you?" "A friend," the stranger said, "or an enemy, depending on your next move." He tossed something at Marco's feet, a second silver dollar. Marco's heartbeat quickened. "You keep digging," the man said, "and you'll find something you won't walk away from." Marco stepped closer, hand on his revolver. "What did you do to Eddie?" The man turned, already disappearing into the dark. "Eddie died because someone talked, and someone will die again if you keep listening." Then silence. Marco was left alone with the coin glinting in the snow. Part 4, the secret foil. The next morning, Marco marched into the precinct, coat dripping, eyes burning with exhaustion. He headed straight to the records room. "Morning, detective," said Officer Hall, the archivist. "I need everything on the Gallucci family. Old files, sealed files, internal reports." Everything. Hall hesitated. "That's restricted." Marco leaned in. "You didn't hear me ask twice." Minutes later, Marco sat in a cold metal chair, a stack of dusty folders before him. He started reading. Then he froze. There it was, a sealed report from 1958, 5 years earlier, describing an internal NYPD corruption case involving officers who regularly tipped off the Gallucci family about raids. On the last page was a list of officers suspected but never charged. Marco's eyes widened. On that list was a name he never expected, Lieutenant James Burrell, Marco's superior, his mentor, the man who taught him everything. His hands began to shake. Eddie Russo didn't die because he talked to Marco. Eddie died because he talked to the wrong cop. Part 5, the setup. Marco returned to the precinct floor. The usual noise felt distant. Phones ringing, boots on tile, the smell of cheap coffee. "Detective Santoro," Burrell called from across the room, smiling warmly. "Walk with me." Marco followed him into a small office. "You look tired," Burrell said. "You take on too much." Marco stared. Burrell continued. "You shouldn't be investigating Pier 42. It's messy. Mafia business." Marco's voice was quiet. "You knew Eddie." "You knew I was working with him," Burrell paused. A flicker of something, not guilt, not fear, passed through his eyes. "Let it go, Marco." "I can't," Burrell sighed. "Then I'm sorry." Before Marco could react, two uniformed officers stepped into the room behind him, hands on guns. Marco realized something was stabbing clarity. He was never meant to solve Eddie's murder. He was meant to join him. Part 6, The Trap at Pier 17. They took Marco's gun. They forced him into a squad car. Burrell sat next to him, silent. The car drove to the waterfront, a quieter pier, abandoned, rotting. Pier 17. Snow churned under the tires. "Get out," Burrell said. Marco stepped into the icy wind. Two men emerged from the darkness. Not cops. Gallucci soldiers. Burrell handed them a small envelope. "Payment." Marco turned to him. "You were helping them all these years?" Burrell shrugged. "I helped keep the peace." "They helped keep order. We understood each other. And Eddie talked too much." Marco clenched his fists. "I'll see you rot for this." Burrell smiled faintly. "No, Marco. You won't see anything." The mobster cocked his pistol. Part 7, The Last Second. The gunman raised the weapon. Marco braced. A shot rang out, but not from the gunman, from behind. Burrell's eyes widened as a bullet struck his shoulder. He collapsed, screaming. Another shot, another. The mobsters scattered. Marco turned. Officer Hall, the records clerk, was sprinting toward him, revolver drawn. "Get down!" Hall yelled. Marco dove as bullets tore into crates and shattered wood. Hall fired again, dropping one of the mobsters. The second fled into the night. Burrell lay bleeding in the snow. Marco stood over him. "You betrayed every badge in this city," Marco said. Burrell coughed. "You don't understand. The city runs on deals. We were a small compromise, a necessary compromise." Marco leaned in, eyes cold. "No compromise is worth a good man's life." Burrell's breath stopped. Part 8, The Report. 2 weeks later, headlines shook the city. Corrupt NYPD lieutenant exposed. Linked to Gallucci. Crime family Marco Santoro refused interviews. He simply filed his final report, placed his badge on the captain's desk, and walked out of the precinct. He loved the badge, but the badge he loved didn't exist anymore. Officer Hall caught up to him outside. "You did the right thing," he said. Marco nodded slowly. "Then why does it feel like I lost?" Hall didn't answer. Marco turned and walked into the Brooklyn evening. Hat low, coat tight, breath disappearing into the cold. Part 9, Epilogue, The Quiet Hero. Marco Santoro disappeared from headlines and from the streets. Some say he moved upstate. Some say he joined private investigations. Some say he drank himself into quiet oblivion. But those who remembered him, the rookies he trained, the neighbors he protected, and the victims he spoke for, said one thing. He did what good men do when the world turns dark. He held the line. And in the dirty war between the badge and the underworld, that was enough to make him a legend. If you made it to the end, thank you. Please leave a like and subscribe. It helps me create more stories like this one. because some secrets are still waiting to be heard.